Let's start with the clock that is currently ticking on Utah's congressional map battle, and the Utah GOP has made their choice clear. In an email, they endorsed Map C. Now, there were 5 maps that were proposed by the GOP. We're talking about the congressional map, the redistricting that's been going on, without getting into the history of it, because our guest will help us with that a little bit. The legislature had proposed maps. We've been using a map for some time. Redistricting committee was formed pursuant to what we called Prop 4, made a recommendation. The GOP enacted their own maps. There was a lawsuit filed. I don't want to spend too much time on this. And we're trying to figure out what the best way to go moving forward, even though the next election cycle where the maps are relevant will be in November 2026. The lieutenant governor and our election clerks really want to know what the maps are going to be by November 10th. So let's get right to it. We have with us Senator Todd Weiler joining us this morning. Todd, it's nice to hear your voice. I wish you were here in the studio because I am all by myself.
Oh, thanks, Greg. Thanks.
So tell me this, and I'm also calling you as an attorney because I respect your legal acumen, and I want to know, and I want our listeners to kind of know where this case sits right now legally. We're in a 10-day public comment period. So what happens next?
Yeah, so the legislature is going to convene in a special session on Monday, and they're going to adopt one of those 6 maps that has been put forward by the Legislative Redistricting Committee that was quickly convened after the judge's ruling at the end of August. And I believe all 6 of those maps comply with the Prop 4 standards, which is what the judge ordered. And then the judge will hold a hearing in about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks from now, and we'll take evidence to see if whatever map comes out of the special session on Monday, if she believes that comports with Prop 4. And I'm confident she'll find it does, because all of those maps were drawn by experts who were given the Prop 4 standards and said, please adhere to all of these standards. Now, Greg, some of those standards are ambiguous because it says community of interest and it's not defined, so that might mean different things to different people. And it says partisan symmetry, and that's not defined, so we're making an effort to define that term in the special session as well. But I think you're going to see the legislature put forward a new map on Monday, and I think the judge will approve it, and we'll have a new map in place when the candidates start filing for re-election or election in the first week of January next year.
One of the problems, maybe it's not a problem, but one of the hurdles, I guess, that the Prop 4 standards created was that the legislative districts obviously had to be equal in numbers. And that made a particular problem with Salt Lake County, because if we divide the state 4 ways, the population, we should get 4 districts that have about 817,000 people. Salt Lake County has more than that. So by
1.2 million.
Right.
Yeah.
So by definition, Salt Lake County has to be split in some way. It was previously split, Todd, 4 ways. All of the maps have to split it at least 2 ways. Can you tell us about about sort of how when you say all 5 of the, or I guess 6 now, maps follow those standards, what was done and what considerations were made with respect to Salt Lake County and the Wasatch Front in general?
Yeah, all of the maps split Salt Lake County into 2 different pieces. They do the 6 maps all do it differently, and I do get emails from people saying, "Well, do your job and keep Salt Lake County in one district." Well, that's impossible, Greg. And above and beyond Prop 4, we have standards from the U.S. Supreme Court that have to be met. Some of those have to deal with not diluting minority votes, but others have to do with the 4 maps have to be equal in population. So usually there's a small variance. You can have a very small variance before them, but you can't put 1.2 million people into one congressional district and then shove everybody else into the other 3. That does not work, and that would not pass constitutional muster. And so Salt Lake County has to be divided. Now, interestingly, the 6 maps, 5 were put forward by the majority caucus, which is the GOP, and 1 was put forward by the Democrats, the minority caucus. Their map splits 13 cities and 5 counties. The 5 other maps, they split like 2 or 3 counties and 2 or 3 cities, and so there is quite a variance. And the only reason I point that out is because the Prop 4, one of the standards that it held most dear, was keeping cities and counties together. So I was quite surprised and a little disappointed that the Democratic map seem to violate that and split 13 different cities.
Yeah, that makes sense because I was going to ask you about the Prop 4 standards, and among others, it encouraged almost more city than county staying together.
Well, both.
Right,
and,
right.
And, we have 249 cities and towns, and we have 29 counties. And so to make population equal districts, you're going to have to split a few. And we've talked about Salt Lake County, but it doesn't work to keep everything else compact. So you have to split a few. But we've got 5 maps, A through E, that basically, like I said, they split like 2 or 3 cities and counties each, and then we have one map that splits 5 counties and 13 cities. And so I don't think that map's going to make it. There's probably other reasons, but don't think that map will make it.
Can you tell us, Todd, what it was about Map C that became more interesting or more palatable to the Republicans?
Yeah, so the judge did amend her order to allow 10 days of public comment. And you've got all kinds of special interests like Better Boundaries and Alliance for Better Utah. They're emailing out their talking points, saying contact your legislator and tell them these things. And I'm getting those word for word, texts and emails and some phone calls with people, reading those scripts to me. And now, just yesterday, you had the Utah Republican Party, which in my mind is another special interest, saying, hey, we've looked at these and we like Map C. So I haven't talked to Rob Axson. I don't know. So one of the things that I can't do, according to Prop 4, is consider partisan data. I'm assuming that others, and the only partisan data I've seen is actually from the media, from people saying, well, we've run the analysis. But at the legislature, we're not doing that because we're prohibited from doing that. And so I can't speak to all the reasons, but I do think it's appropriate with public comment for different organizations to tell their members what they think the public comment should be. And then my job as a lawmaker is to kind of sift through all that and try to find the right policy. But if people are going to criticize the Republicans on the right for telling their people what they think they should offer as public comment, then I think it's only fair to criticize the organizations on the left, Better Boundaries and Alliance for Better Utah, which both clearly align with the Utah Democratic Party for doing the same thing. And so this is what I call politics as usual. I don't think anyone should be offended that redistricting is a political process, whether you like it or not. And so I think this is kind of to be expected.
Todd, we're out of time, but I need to ask you a question anyway. I'm going to get in trouble for this. In 30 seconds, people keep telling me after the hearing, the judge is going to make a decision. That's not accurate, correct? Which map is going to be?
She has to decide if the map we forward comports with Prop 4, and I'm telling you it will.
Okay.
And I think there was a fear that we would kind of just ignore her ruling and just say we're not doing anything, and then she would have to then pick a map on her own. But that's not. I think that's been taken off the table.
All right. So what you're saying is you're going to come together and propose a map that is within the standards of this Prop 4, and you believe that given that the judge will almost certainly accept it.
100% correct. Yes.
All right. Well, thanks, Todd. I appreciate the legal help today on that as well.
All right. Take care.
People have presented some maps. I guess I was thinking of it mathematically. If you're the Republicans and you've submitted 5 maps, and you're asking for public comment, that's going to be divided 5 ways. The Democrats submit 1 map. So, I'm just doing the math here. Let's say that 80% of the people like the Republican maps, but they divide it 5 ways. That means everybody gets 16%. I'm just being painful here. The Democrat map gets 20%. That would seem to be the more popular map when, in fact, maybe it's not. And I've confused things, and luckily I have Utah Republican Chair Rob Axson with us. So, Rob, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to be with you.
Tell our listeners, Rob, where you think we are in the process right now. Still in the public comment period. The Republicans have put forth 5 maps that seem to do, at least from what we're hearing, what the judge required in terms of the parameters of Prop 4. Can you tell us what your perspective is on that?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I disagree with the decision of the judge here. I do not think that moving to the courts making decisions on this or even the independent commission makes sense. Our Constitution here in the state is pretty clear that the role and authority of redistricting is that of the legislature. So I just have to say that at the forefront. But I commend the legislature for trying to comply and doing what they're being forced to do through the courts, and they have a court order, and they're going about doing it in compliance with that, and they've done a very good job these last couple of weeks of doing it on a truncated time schedule.
Should the Republicans have sort of endorsed one of the maps over the rest, or was there a reason behind that? Or did I explain it? I don't know if you heard my explanation for it.
I didn't hear your explanation before I called in, but I will tell you, I think you're referring to the Utah Republican Party encouraging comments. And first and foremost, yes, absolutely. We are a constituency. The Utah Republican Party represents about 1 million Utahns. And we have a role to play of leaning into this process. I will tell you that in deference to this legislative process and in compliance with the restrictions that they've been put on, we have gone above and beyond to not reach out to the legislature themselves, up to and including. I haven't spoken to a single one of the legislators that are on this redistricting committee about this. And in fact, even when I've seen them, it's just been cordial, like, hey, how are you doing? And then go about my way, because I don't want to put them in a difficult spot since they have to comply with the courts. But the idea that the Utah Republican Party, or that any Utahn or any group for that matter, whether they agree with me or not, has to be silent or quiet is one that I just absolutely reject.
Does your disagreement, Rob, with what the judge did, is it fundamental in the respect that the citizen initiative was sort of void, invalid at the outset, in that it usurped what you've described, I should say, as the legislative power, from the Constitution? That's a terribly worded question.
No, but I get what you're asking, and that's where I stand. Yes, I happen to be a Republican, and others happen to be Democrats or other labels. But ultimately, the thing that we benefit from here in this country, and even in this state, is that we are a country of laws and rules and structure, and we are a constitutional republic, which means that we lean into the benefit of having people elected to represent us. That's what the U.S. is. That's what Utah is. And I think we're in this interesting space where, beginning with that state Supreme Court case last year that reinterpreted the role of the legislative authority given to the people generally, separate from their elected officials, we're in this space where we're trying to figure that out. That was a new way of looking at things after a 100-year history of kind of understanding it one way. We're now being forced to understand it a different way. Judge Gibson layered on top of that with another new novel approach to understanding and interpreting the law. And so I think it's unfortunate that when we're still in this space of trying to figure out where the law lands between that tension between the judiciary and the legislature, to be forced to deal with outcomes that are just effectively one individual's interpretation. I think it would have been more appropriate for a stay to be put into place while this was litigated and appealed, and then we would see where it is in a year or two. But instead, we're being forced to finalize the conclusion before the state and the legislature have actually gone about the entire appeal process. Ultimately, I think parties serve a purpose of trying to mobilize and engage around shared principles. But the thing that we benefit from as Americans, as Utahns, is that we have a shared rule book that we play by. And I think that this decision and what we're doing right now is confusing that, and it's creating more unnecessary tension.
This is probably a tangential issue, not necessarily related to redistricting, but is there a place, Rob, for ballot initiatives in the future? I mean, do you see that, or do you think that we elect legislators to pass laws, and that's what we go to the ballot box for every 4 or 2 years?
I think we absolutely need to lean into the power of the ballot box. I know people talk about term limits, for example. Well, we have an opportunity to fire people every 2 years or 4 years or 6 years in this country on the state and federal and local levels. We need to engage in that more. So, yes, I do think there's a role for initiatives, but I'm one that thinks that where we were for 100 years made sense, that the people get an opportunity to speak, and it can inform and direct the legislature. But ultimately, the legislature was elected by voters and their constituents to represent them. And I think it's to our long-term dissatisfaction and to our long-term detriment as Utahns, regardless of political party, if we start moving too far away from the principles of a republic and into this idea of direct democracy. I don't think that this will play well. Look at this underlying case where, as you know, it was on the ballot in 2018. And there was $2.8 million spent to promote this ballot initiative, and there was $0 spent in opposition to it. And yet it still was decided by, I believe it was 0.62% separation in the vote. So by no means was this a strong mandate. You had $2.8 million motivating or potentially confusing or encouraging people one direction, and it still was a razor-thin issue. So there's by no means a mandate here. So now the idea that our elected representatives can't engage on this issue and just have to capitulate to the whims of a judge's interpretation here, I think is wrong.
Rob, we've got about a minute left, but we had Todd Weiler on earlier this morning, and he's not on the subcommittee that is going to propose or did the public hearings last week, but he did feel like the 5 maps that were proposed that came out of that committee all met within the parameters of Prop 4 anyway, so that if the judge ends up picking one or the legislature recommends one, which I guess is what's really going to happen, that we shouldn't have a problem nonetheless. Do you agree with that?
No, I think he's exactly right. I don't think we should be in this process, but we are. We're not in a vacuum. We have to comply with this judge's order, and the legislature is doing this. And the process that they did comply with all of the stipulations that they had. And I, like I said, I appreciate the legislature doing that. So I think that there's not a realm where it would make sense for the judge to deny any of these maps, since they each went through an independent process and comply with all of the things that she said that they had to comply with. So ultimately, I think the public weighing in, and as you know, the Utah Republican Party encouraged all of our members to weigh in on their preferred maps. We encourage them to look closely at Map C. I think it's the one that balances urban and rural issues to make sure that Utah is represented well in Congress. And the legislature will ultimately be able to pick from one of them.
Thanks, Rob. That was Rob Axson, Utah Republican Party Chair, who's always available to us, and I think explained that very, very well.